A few years after his father died, Jim Lehrer wrote a book about what happened in 1946. He describes how his family became owner-operators of a small bus line in central Kansas.
We had 3 buses. All of them worn out from the war. Dad didn't have enough money to buy a new bus, so we had 3 worn-out buses. And it was called Kansas Central Lines. It went from Wichita, Valley Center, Sedgwick, back over to Newton, and went north Newton, Gossel, Lehigh, and then it was kind of like a T. At Lehigh, there was one run that went west, Galva, Canton, McPherson, and then the one went east, Marion, Elmdale Corner, Strong City, and then Emporia. And anyhow, to make a very long story short, the bus company lasted for only a year. It began in June of 1946, and it went belly up and went bankrupt in July of 1947. It's a very traumatic thing for my father. In fact, my dad never really got over it in many ways. He felt that that he had been, the fact that he had to file bankruptcy. Now everybody files bankruptcy now, it's no big deal. But back then, it was a terribly embarrassing thing for him because when you file bankruptcy, it means that you didn't have to pay your debts. And Dad felt that he owed this moral commitment to all these people, particularly in the small towns. Most of the debts were owed to people who ran little garages in Lehigh and Gossel and Newton, and when the bus would break down, they'd come out and fix it. And those buses broke down all the time, Dave. I mean, that's what did us in.
Not only were the buses well worn, but the roads they traveled over weren't quite the same as we see them today. The Kansas Central Lines had 52 miles of gravel on its route, half of that being a stretch of Highway 15.
And it was quite an experience. For my brother and me, I was 12 years old, he was 14. For us, it was quite an adventure because we would ride around with him. And when the bus broke down, we would go. Our job was to put water in the radiator and help people with baggage and all of that. And it was only afterward that we realized what an awful thing this had been for my dad. And
the Lehrer family lived in Marion during the time they ran their bus line. Having sold their Wichita home to finance the company, the 4 of them shared 2 rooms and sparse accommodations in the Marion Hotel. To young Jimmy Charles Lehrer, it was both an exhilarating and an embarrassing time.
You keep in mind, from my perspective, I was a 12-year-old boy and who thought this was an incredible thing. I mean, here we had these great old buses and we were running this thing, and yet there was a tinge of embarrassment to it too, particularly when my mother was driving the bus. And there were times when we lived in Marion, and Dad fixed the schedule so the bus would come through in the afternoon when school got out, so I could go ride with Mother. And I was embarrassed of the fact that my mother was driving the bus. And so a lot of times when I would get on the bus, I'd put my head down. I'd just tell Mother I wasn't feeling good or something, because I was afraid some of these kids, would see me and then they'd think, well, his mother's a bus driver, and I'm ashamed of that feeling now. But that experience, I realize now at my elderly age, it made a terrific impression on me, and I have an incredible affinity for people who run, little diners and little anythings. Because I know that somewhere there's some poor man or some poor woman or who they probably have kids who have staked not just their fortunes, small or large as though they've staked their psyche on all of this kind of thing. And you go into some little store somewhere and you think, oh, well, it's just a little store. It's not just a little store, not to the people who own and run the thing. And the people that wait on you, or the people that pick you up, or the people that do whatever, are the people who put their souls on the line to run it. And it's part of me, and it will be forever.